Alien scientists unleashed a predator cub to test humans. It became their friend. The glass wall in front of me turned from clear to bright white, and I knew that meant something was about to walk through the door behind it. My name is Daniel Brooks, and 3 weeks ago I was driving home from work on a normal Tuesday night. Now I was standing barefoot on cold metal floor, inside a room built by creatures who did not look like anything from any movie I had ever seen. I did not know where I was. I did not know what planet I was on. All I knew was that the air smelled like burnt copper, and every time I breathed in, my chest felt tight, like my lungs were trying to get used to something they were never built for. A voice came through a speaker somewhere above me. It was not in English, but somehow I understood it anyway. Later I learned this was a small device they had placed under my skin, behind my ear, while I was unconscious. It changed their words into words I could follow. Subject 12. Prepare for behavioral trial. I looked down at my own hands. They were shaking. I pressed them against my legs to make them stop, but it did not work. The door on the other side of the glass room slid open with a low hiss. Something stepped out. At first, I thought it was a large dog. Then I saw the second set of legs folded against its back, and the way its skin moved like it was made of dark scales instead of fur. It had eyes that were too big for its face, and they were locked on me the second it walked in. It was small, maybe the size of a large wolf pup, but its claws scraped against the floor with a sound that made my stomach turn into a fist. I backed up until my shoulders hit the wall behind me. There was nowhere else to go. "Do not move suddenly," the voice said from the speaker, like that was helpful information, and not something I already understood from every nature documentary I had ever watched as a kid. The creature took one step toward me. Then it stopped. I held my breath. It tilted its head, the same way a dog does when it hears a strange sound. Its big eyes blinked, slow and careful. I noticed its legs were trembling too. Not just mine. That was the first thing that confused me. I expected to be looking at a hunter. Instead, I was looking at something that looked just as lost as I felt. I stayed completely still, my back pressed against cold metal, my hands flat against the wall, my heart slamming so hard I could feel it in my throat. The creature took another step. Slower this time. Its claws barely touched the floor before lifting again, like it was trying not to make noise. Somewhere behind the glass, I heard quiet alien voices speaking fast. I could not understand them, since the device behind my ear only worked for direct speech aimed at me. But I could hear the surprise in their tone, even in a language I did not know. Surprise has a sound. It does not need translation. The creature stopped about 10 feet away from me. It lowered its head, and a low sound came from its throat. Not quite a growl, more like a whine. I thought about every survival show I had ever seen. Stay calm. Do not run. Do not look weak, but do not look like a threat either. So I did the only thing that felt right in that moment. I slowly slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor. I made myself smaller. I put my hands where it could see them, palms open. "Hey," I said quietly, even though I had no idea if it understood a single word coming out of my mouth. "I'm not going to hurt you." The creature flinched at the sound of my voice. Its ears, which I had not even noticed were there, folded back flat against its skull. It was scared of me. That thought hit me harder than anything else that had happened since I woke up in this place. I was the prisoner here. I was the one behind glass, the one being tested, the one with a device buried under his skin. And somehow, this animal in front of me was just as afraid as I was. Minutes passed. I do not know exactly how many, because there was no clock in that room, only the soft hum of machines and the occasional flicker of light from somewhere above the glass. The creature crept closer, one slow step at a time. Every few feet it would stop, lower its head, and watch me, waiting to see if I would move. I did not. I kept my hands open. I kept my voice low, saying small things like, "It's okay," and "easy now," the same words I might use if I found a stray dog hiding under a porch. Eventually it was close enough that I could see the details on its skin. Not quite scales, not quite fur, something in between, dark green near its spine and lighter near its belly. Its claws were long, built for tearing through something tough, maybe armor, maybe bone. But right now those claws were curled inward, careful, like it did not want to use them. It sniffed the air near my outstretched hand. I felt its breath, warm and a little damp, against my fingers. I did not move. The voices behind the glass had gone completely silent. Then, slowly, the creature lowered its head and pressed its nose against my palm. I let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. For a moment, neither of us moved. The room felt very quiet, except for the steady hum of the building around us, and the soft sound of the creature breathing. Then it made a small sound, almost like a question, and pushed its head further into my hand, the way a cat does when it wants to be touched. I almost laughed, almost, because it felt insane to be sitting on the floor of an alien laboratory, somewhere I had no name for, gently touching the head of a creature that was supposed to be a weapon used to test me. A bright light flashed above the glass wall, 3 short pulses. I guess that meant the trial was over, or paused, or something had gone differently than they expected. The creature's head snapped up at the sound. Its body went rigid. For one terrible second I thought it was about to attack, that the calm moment we had just shared was some kind of trick, some instinct switching back on inside it. Instead, it pressed itself closer to me, not to attack, to hide. It tucked its body against my side, the way a frightened dog presses against its owner during a thunderstorm. I felt its heartbeat, fast and small, against my ribs. Whatever those flashing lights meant, it was scared of them too. I wrapped one arm around it without even thinking about whether that was a smart decision. My instincts had stopped asking permission from my brain a while ago. The door across the room slid open again. 2 of the creature's keepers stepped inside, tall figures wrapped in pale gray suits, their faces hidden behind dark visors. They moved carefully, like they were not sure what they were seeing. One of them lifted something that looked like a long metal pole with a glowing tip. The creature beside me flinched so hard its whole body shook. I do not know what made me do what I did next. Maybe it was 3 weeks of fear finally turning into something else. Maybe it was the simple fact that I was tired of being told what to do by people, or things, that had taken me from my home without asking. I stood up, keeping the creature behind my legs, and looked straight at the 2 figures in gray. "Don't," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Whatever that thing is for, don't use it." They stopped walking. For a long moment, nobody moved. The creature pressed itself tighter against the back of my knees, and I could feel it trembling there, waiting to see what would happen next, just like I was. The figure holding the glowing pole tilted its head toward the other one beside it. They were speaking, but not out loud. I noticed a faint light pulsing along the side of their visors, on and off, like some kind of silent conversation passing between them. I had seen this before, twice, in the 3 weeks since I arrived. It always happened right before something changed in the room. I kept my eyes on the pole. The tip glowed a soft blue, almost peaceful looking, which somehow made it worse. Things that hurt you should not look gentle. "We are not finished with the trial," one of them finally said, and the voice came through clean and flat, like it was reading from a script it had read 100 times before. "Step away from the subject." "It has a name," I said, even though I did not actually know its name, if it even had one. "Or it will. Give it a second. It's scared. It cannot be afraid. It was bred for this purpose." I almost laughed at that, except nothing about this moment felt funny. I could feel the small body behind my legs shaking hard enough that I could feel it through my own skin. Bred for a purpose did not seem to mean very much right then. Whatever they built this creature to do, it had not done it. It had done something else instead. "Then your breeding program has a problem," I said, "because it's hiding behind a human instead of attacking one." That seemed to land somewhere, because the 2 figures went still again, their visors flashing faster this time. Behind the glass wall, the taller shape I had noticed earlier leaned forward slightly, like it was watching a screen instead of a room. I had the strange feeling that whoever that was, they were more important than the two standing in front of me. The creature shifted its weight, and one of its claws scraped lightly against the back of my heel. I almost flinched, but I caught myself. I did not want it to think I was pulling away. I crouched back down slowly, keeping my body between the creature and the two figures with the pole. Up close, I could see its chest rising and falling fast, too fast, the way a person breathes right before they cry, but are trying very hard not to. "You're okay," I said quietly, mostly to it, even though part of me was saying it to myself too. "Nobody is going to hurt you while I'm standing here." It made that small questioning sound again, the one from before, somewhere between a whimper and a chirp. I reached back without looking and let my hand rest against its side. Its heartbeat was rapid under my palm, like a bird caught indoors, slamming itself against a window it could not understand. One of the gray figures took a step forward, the pole raised slightly higher. "This behavior was not predicted," it said, and for the first time, the flat voice did not sound quite so flat. There was something underneath it now, maybe confusion, maybe concern. I could not be sure, since I had no idea what their version of those feelings even looked like. "Maybe you should write that down," I said. "Seems important." The pole lowered, just slightly. Behind the glass, the tall shape lifted one long arm and made a small motion. The two figures in front of me stopped moving entirely, as if a switch had been flipped somewhere inside them. Whoever was behind that glass had more control over this room than I had realized. A new voice came through the speaker above us, deeper than the first, slower, like every word had been chosen with care before being spoken. Subject 12. Step back from the juvenile and remain calm. No harm will come to either of you in this moment. I did not move right away. Promises from creatures who had taken me from my home without asking did not mean very much to me anymore. But something in the way the voice spoke made me believe, at least a little, that this was different from before. I glanced down at the creature pressed against my legs. Its big eyes were turned up toward me, waiting, the same way a child waits to see if the adult in the room is going to be angry or calm. I realized, somewhere in the middle of all that fear, it had decided I was safe. Out of everything in this entire building, it had chosen me. I was not about to let that be a mistake. "I'll step back," I said slowly, "but it stays close to me. Whatever you were trying to test, you got your answer. It's not what you expected. Don't punish it for that." There was a pause, long enough that I started to wonder if I had pushed too far. Then the deep voice spoke again. "Understood. Observation will continue." The two figures in gray lowered their poles fully and stepped back toward the door, though their visors kept flashing the entire time, clearly still talking to each other, or to someone else I could not see. The creature let out a long breath against my leg, almost like relief, and finally stopped shaking. I stayed crouched on that cold metal floor for a long time after the door closed again, one hand resting on the back of a creature built to be a weapon, somewhere on a planet I could not name, with no idea what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time since I arrived in this place, I was not standing alone. 3 days passed before anyone came back into the room. I spent that time learning the creature in small pieces, the way you learn a new neighbor through their habits instead of their words. It slept in short bursts, curled into a tight ball near the corner farthest from the door. It ate whatever was pushed through a small slot in the wall, gray blocks of something that smelled faintly like fish, though it always pushed half of it toward me first, as if sharing was simply something it understood without being taught. I started calling it Finn, mostly because it reminded me of a dog I had growing up, and partly because every creature deserves a name that is not a number. Finn learned the name fast. By the second day, his head would turn the moment I said it, ears lifting, eyes finding mine across the room. By the third day, he would walk straight to me whenever I sat down, pressing his side against my leg, like that was simply where he belonged now. The room had no clock, but my body still tried to count days the old way: breakfast, lunch, dinner, sleep, even though none of those things matched what was actually happening around me. I had given up trying to guess how long I had truly been here. Counting only made the panic worse. On what I guessed was the fourth day, the lights above the glass wall changed color, shifting from white to a pale yellow, and the door slid open again. Finn's whole body went tense beside me. I placed a hand on his back without thinking, and felt some of the tension ease, just slightly, like he was borrowing calm from me because he did not have enough of his own. A single figure walked in this time, no glowing pole, no gray suit. This one wore something closer to deep blue, fitted tight against a tall, narrow body. Its skin was a pale gray, smoother than the others I had seen, and its eyes were a soft amber color instead of the flat black I had grown used to seeing through the glass. It stopped a few feet away and studied us both for a long moment. "You named it," the figure said. Its voice was different from the others too, less flat, almost curious. "He has a name now, yeah," I said. "Finn." "Interesting." The figure tilted its head slightly. "May I ask why?" I shrugged, even though I was not sure it understood the gesture. Felt right. He needed one. Most subjects do not consider that a priority during a survival trial. Most subjects probably aren't being tested against a scared baby animal, I said. Maybe try testing something that's actually dangerous next time. See how that goes. The figure made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been something closer to surprise. It was hard to tell. He was meant to be dangerous. The breeding line he comes from has produced effective combat predators for generations. His behavior here is unusual. Maybe your breeding line finally produced one with a heart, I said. The figure's amber eyes moved to Finn, who had pressed himself fully against my side now, watching the newcomer carefully but without the same panic he had shown the others. "My name is Vera," the figure said after a pause. "I lead this research division. I would like to ask you some questions, Daniel Brooks, if you are willing." Hearing my actual name come out of something that was not human sent a strange chill through me. "You know my name. We know quite a lot about you. It was necessary, before selecting you for this trial." "Selecting me, so this wasn't random." "Very little here is random," Vera said. "Will you answer my questions?" I looked down at Finn, who had finally settled enough to close his eyes halfway, though his ears still flicked toward every sound in the room. "Depends on the questions," I said. Vera stepped closer, slow and deliberate, the same kind of careful movement I had used on Finn just days earlier. I noticed that, and wondered if it was intentional. "Why did you choose to sit down?" Vera asked. "Most beings, when faced with an unknown predator, choose to run, to fight, or to freeze entirely. You did none of these." I thought about it honestly, instead of giving some clever answer just to sound brave. Running would have meant nowhere to go. Fighting would have meant hurting something that looked more scared than dangerous. Freezing wouldn't have changed anything either way. Sitting down felt like the only choice that gave both of us a chance. A chance for what? To not make things worse, I said. He didn't choose to be put in a room with me any more than I chose to be put in a room with him. Seemed unfair to punish him for that. Vera was quiet for a moment, studying me with those strange amber eyes. "This is the response we hope to study," Vera finally said, "though I admit we did not expect it to take this particular shape." "What were you actually trying to learn?" I asked. "Be honest, I think I've earned that much." Vera glanced toward the glass wall, where I could now see two more shapes standing, watching silently. Then it looked back at me. "There is a debate among my people," Vera said, "about what defines a dangerous species. Some believe danger is measured by strength, by weapons, by the ability to destroy. Others believe danger is measured by adaptability, by the ability to form bonds quickly, even with creatures bred to oppose you. Your species has shown both qualities in different encounters across known space. We wish to see which one would surface here, under pressure, without warning." "And which one did you see?" I asked. "The second," Vera said, "far more strongly than predicted models suggested." I felt a small flicker of pride at that. even though I was not entirely sure pride was the right thing to feel while sitting on the floor of an alien laboratory. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Do I go home? Does Finn go back wherever he came from? What's the next step in your big experiment?" Vera hesitated, just slightly, before answering. "That decision is not entirely mine to make." Something about the way Vera said that made my stomach tighten. "Meaning what?" I asked. "Meaning there are others within this facility who view this outcome differently than I do," Vera said. "Some believe the bond you have formed with the juvenile is a flaw to be corrected, a mistake in his breeding to be removed." Finn's ears flicked at the tone of the conversation, even though he could not understand the words. I felt his body press tighter against mine. "Removed how?" I asked, though some part of me already feared the answer. "There are methods," Vera said carefully, "to reset behavioral patterns in juveniles his age. They are not gentle." My hand tightened on Finn's back without meaning to. He let out a small sound, somewhere between a whine and a question, and looked up at me like he could feel something shifting in the room, even if he could not understand the words causing it. "That's not happening," I said, my voice harder than I expected it to come out. "I understand your feelings on the matter," Vera said, "but you must understand, within this facility, you do not currently hold the authority to make that decision." "Then give me the authority," I said, "or find a way to make this not their decision either." Vera studied me for a long moment, something shifting behind those amber eyes that I could not quite name. "There may be a way," Vera finally said, "though it would require more from you than simply sitting calmly in a room." "I'm listening," I said. "The facility leadership values results above all else," Vera said. "If the bond between you and the juvenile can be shown to have value beyond a single trial, beyond a single room, there is a chance it would not be erased so easily. Continued cooperation, demonstrated trust, evidence that what happened here was not an accident, but something repeatable, something useful." "So you want me to keep proving it," I said. "I want to give you the chance to save him," Vera said simply. "Whether you choose to take that chance is your decision." I looked down at Finn, who had finally relaxed enough to rest his head across my knee, his big eyes drifting half-closed, completely unaware of how close he had just come to losing everything that made him who he was. I thought about my old apartment, the one with the broken heater and the noisy upstairs neighbors. I thought about the highway I had been driving on the night all of this started, the radio playing some song I could not even remember the name of anymore. None of that felt real here. None of that felt like it mattered as much as the small weight of Finn's head against my leg. "Tell me what I need to do," I said. Vera's expression, if it could even be called that, shifted into something that almost looked like relief. "Tomorrow," Vera said, "there will be a second trial, different from the first. I cannot tell you everything in advance, as the response must remain genuine. But I will tell you this much: it will be harder than the first." "Harder how?" "The first trial tested whether you could remain calm in the presence of danger," Vera said. "The second will test something else entirely." "What?" Vera looked at Finn, then back at me, and for the first time since walking into the room, its voice dropped lower, almost gentle. "It will test whether you are willing to protect something weaker than yourself, even when protecting it costs you something in return." The yellow lights above the glass wall flickered once, then returned to the steady white I had grown used to. Vera turned and walked back toward the door without another word, leaving me alone with Finn and a question I could not stop turning over in my mind. What exactly was this second trial going to cost me? Finn shifted against my leg, letting out a long, slow breath, completely unaware that somewhere above us, decisions were already being made about both of our futures. I ran my hand gently along his back, feeling the rapid little heartbeat steady out beneath my palm. "Whatever it is," I said quietly, more to myself than to him, "we'll figure it out together." He pressed his head harder against my hand, like he understood exactly what I meant, even without a single word of translation passing between us. That night, if it was even night, I did not sleep. I sat against the wall with Finn curled into my side, listening to the quiet hum of the building around us, wondering what kind of trial could possibly be designed to test something as simple and as complicated as loyalty. At some point, the small slot in the wall opened again, and another gray block of food slid through. I broke off a piece and offered it to Finn first, the way he always offered his share to me. He took it gently from my fingers, careful with his teeth even though I had seen those same teeth tear through tougher material during feeding earlier that week. It struck me, somewhere in the quiet of that room, that gentleness was a choice for him now, not an accident. Somewhere along the way, in 3 short days, he had decided I was not something to be careful around out of fear, but something to be careful with out of trust. I thought about what Vera had said, about other voices in this facility who saw our bond as a flaw rather than a discovery. I wondered how many other rooms like this one existed somewhere in this building, how many other creatures had been bred and tested and reset when their results did not match expectations. The thought made my chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with the strange air I was still getting used to breathing. I did not know much about the species running this facility. I did not know their history, their wars, their reasons for studying species like mine from across the stars. But I knew enough now to understand that somewhere in their world, results mattered more than the beings producing them. That was a feeling I recognized, even from a planet away. I had seen it in offices, in classrooms, in places back home where people were graded and measured and discarded the moment they stopped being useful in the expected way. Maybe that was why Finn's trembling, frightened reaction in that first trial had struck something in me so quickly. I understood what it felt like to be expected to perform one way, and to fail simply by being something else entirely. Finn shifted in his sleep beside me, one paw twitching against the floor, chasing something only he could see. I wondered if creatures like him dreamed the way I did, if somewhere in his mind he was running through whatever world he had been born into before all of this, before glass walls and glowing poles and a stranger who refused to be afraid of him. I must have drifted off at some point, because the next thing I knew, the lights above the glass wall had shifted back to that pale yellow color, and Finn was already awake, sitting upright beside me, ears pointed toward the door. The door slid open, and Vera stepped back inside, this time accompanied by 2 others I had not seen before. They wore the same deep blue as Vera, though their posture was stiffer, more formal, like soldiers standing at attention rather than scientists observing an experiment. "It is time," Vera said simply. I stood up slowly, and Finn rose with me, pressing close against my leg the way he always did now whenever strangers entered the room. "You said this trial would test whether I'm willing to protect him, even if it costs me something," I said. "I need to know what that cost actually looks like before we start." Vera's amber eyes flickered, something passing behind them that I still could not fully read. I am not permitted to explain the full parameters in advance, but I can tell you this. The choice you make in the next few moments will determine far more than whether Finn remains in this facility. "What else does it determine? Whether your species," Vera said quietly, "is considered worth continued contact at all." The words landed heavier than I expected, settling into my chest like a stone dropped into still water. I looked down at Finn, who looked back up at me with those wide, trusting eyes, completely unaware that the next few minutes might decide far more than his own fate. "Then let's get started," I said, even though every part of me wanted more time to think, more time to prepare for whatever was coming. Vera nodded once and turned toward the 2 stiff figures beside the door. "Bring them through," Vera said. The door slid open wider this time, and I felt Finn's body go rigid against my leg as something far larger than him stepped into view from the hallway beyond. The creature that walked through the door was nothing like Finn. It stood taller than me, its shoulders broad and covered in thick plates that looked like natural armor, dark red and gray, scarred in places from old battles I could only imagine. Its eyes were narrow and yellow, locked onto Finn the moment it entered the room, and a low sound rumbled from somewhere deep in its chest that needed no translation device to understand. This was a predator that had never once trembled in front of anyone. Finn pressed himself so tightly against my leg that I nearly lost my balance. I reached down and rested my hand on his back, but I could feel his whole body shaking now, worse than that very first day. "This is Korath," Vera said, standing well back near the door. "A fully matured adult of the same breeding line as Finn. He has completed every combat assessment in our facility, with results exceeding all projections." "And you're putting him in a room with a scared cub," I said, my voice rising before I could stop it. "What kind of test is this?" "The kind that determines whether your earlier actions were a single moment of unusual behavior," Vera said, "or something you are willing to repeat, even when the danger is real instead of uncertain." Korath took a slow step forward, claws scraping hard against the floor, each step deliberate, almost mocking in how unhurried it was. Finn whimpered and tried to press himself behind my legs entirely, small and shaking, all of the calm he had built over the past few days completely gone. "He's a baby," I said, stepping sideways to keep myself fully between Korath and Finn. "He's terrified. This isn't a fair test of anything." "Life rarely offers fair tests," Vera said. "Only real ones." Korath's yellow eyes shifted from Finn to me, studying me the way a predator studies an obstacle rather than a threat. I had no doubt that in his mind, I was simply something standing between him and a meal, or a kill, or whatever instinct was currently running through whatever was left of his free will after years of training. "Korath," I said slowly, keeping my voice as steady as I could manage. "Has he been trained to hurt him specifically, or is this just instinct?" "Both," Vera admitted, though instinct alone would likely be sufficient. Juveniles outside of direct pack protection are typically viewed as either competition or prey, even by members of their own species. "Then call this off," I said. "Right now." "I cannot," Vera said. "The trial has already begun the moment Korath entered the room. Stopping it now would itself be recorded as a result. Your response, Daniel Brooks, is the only variable still undetermined." Korath let out a low growl and took another step forward, closing the distance between us to maybe 15 feet. Finn pressed himself flat against the floor behind me, every muscle in his small body coiled tight, ready to either run or freeze. I could not tell which. I thought fast, faster than I had thought about anything in my entire life. Running would mean leaving Finn exposed. Standing still might mean both of us getting hurt anyway. I had no weapon, no training, nothing but my own body between a frightened cub and a fully grown predator built for exactly this kind of moment. "Okay," I said quietly, mostly to myself. "Okay, think." It happened faster than I expected, a sudden blur of red and gray closing the distance in a single powerful movement. I did not have time to think anymore. I just moved, throwing myself sideways, putting my full body between Korath and the spot where Finn had been crouching just a second earlier. Pain exploded across my shoulder as something heavy slammed into me, knocking the air completely out of my lungs. I hit the floor hard, rolling once, before stopping flat on my back, staring up at the ceiling while my vision swam with bright flashing spots. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard Finn make a sound I had never heard from him before, sharp and high and full of pure panic. I forced myself up onto my elbows, my shoulders screaming with every movement, and saw Korath standing over Finn, who had backed himself into the corner of the room, completely trapped. "No," I gasped, pushing myself up despite the pain. "No, get away from him." I do not remember deciding to move. My body simply did it on its own, pulling itself across the floor and back onto unsteady legs, throwing itself toward Korath's side, with absolutely no plan beyond putting myself between them again. Korath turned at the sound of my movement, those yellow eyes narrowing, and for one terrifying second I thought this was the moment everything ended. 3 weeks ago I had been driving home from a normal day at work, and now I was about to die defending a creature I had known for less than a week, somewhere among the stars, with no one back home ever knowing what happened to me. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, one of the empty food containers from earlier, and threw it as hard as I could at Korath's face. It was not a real weapon. It barely even made him flinch, but it bought half a second, just enough time for me to get my body fully between them, arms spread wide, making myself as large a target as I possibly could. "Take me instead," I said, my voice cracking but steady enough to mean it. "Leave him alone." Korath paused. It was such a small thing, barely noticeable, but I felt it immediately. The predator standing in front of me, built and trained for exactly this moment, hesitated. His yellow eyes moved between me and Finn, then back again, something shifting behind them that I could not fully understand. Whatever instinct had been driving him toward Finn a moment ago seemed to stumble against something else now, something unexpected. "Interesting," Vera said quietly from near the door, though I barely registered the word through the pounding in my ears. Korath let out a low sound, somewhere between a growl and a question, and took one step back instead of forward. I did not move. I kept my arms spread, my body between them, every muscle locked tight, waiting for the moment this hesitation ended and the attack resumed. It did not happen. Instead, Korath lowered his head slightly, his ears flattening against his skull in a way that looked almost confused, and let out a long breath through his nose. Behind me, Finn whimpered softly, and I felt his small body press itself against the back of my legs again, trembling but no longer trying to run. "The trial," Vera called out, "may be considered complete." The two stiff figures by the door moved quickly, stepping between Korath and us, with long poles similar to the one I had seen earlier, guiding him gently but firmly back toward the hallway. Korath went without much resistance, though his eyes lingered on me until the door finally slid shut behind him. The moment the door closed, my legs gave out completely, and I dropped hard onto the floor, my shoulder finally letting me feel the full weight of the pain I had been ignoring. Finn was at my side instantly, pressing his small body against mine, making soft, worried sounds as he sniffed at my injured shoulder, as if he somehow understood that this injury existed because of him. "I'm okay," I said, though my voice did not sound very convincing even to me. "I'm okay, buddy." Vera approached slowly, crouching down to my level for the first time since we had met. "You should not have been able to survive direct contact with an adult of that size." "Felt pretty real to me," I said, wincing as I tried to shift my shoulder. "The impact was real," Vera said, "but Korath's full strength was not used. Had he chosen to commit fully to the attack, your injuries would have been far more severe." "So he held back," I said slowly, the pain in my shoulder suddenly feeling slightly less important than what Vera had just said. "He hesitated," Vera corrected. Something in his training conflicted with what he witnessed. A human placing itself between a predator and a juvenile of the predator's own species is not a scenario his conditioning prepared him for. I looked down at Finn, who had curled himself tightly against my side, still trembling slightly, his big eyes fixed on me like he was checking to make sure I was actually still there. "Did I pass?" I asked, the question feeling strange even as I said it out loud. Vera was quiet for a long moment, studying both of us carefully. "You did something far more significant than passing a trial," Vera finally said. "You changed an outcome that every model in this facility predicted with near total certainty. Korath has never once hesitated during a combat assessment in his entire life." "Good," I said. "Maybe that means something to whoever's in charge of deciding Finn's future." "It will mean something," Vera said. "Whether it means enough is a different question entirely." Before I could ask what that meant, the door slid open one final time, and a new figure stepped through, taller than Vera, dressed in a deep black uniform that seemed to absorb the light around it, rather than reflect it. Every other alien I had seen so far moved with careful, measured steps. This one moved like it had never once needed to consider whether a room was safe to enter. Vera stood immediately, posture shifting into something stiff and formal. "Director Solus," Vera said. The director's dark eyes moved slowly across the room, taking in the scene, my injured shoulder, Finn pressed tightly against my side, the lingering scent of the conflict that had just taken place. "I have reviewed the results," Director Solus said, voice low and even, carrying none of the curiosity I had heard in Vera's tone. "The outcome is unacceptable." My stomach dropped. "Unacceptable how?" Vera asked, a careful edge entering its own voice now. "This facility was not built to produce companions," Director Solus said. "It was built to produce data on threat assessment. A human willing to sacrifice itself for an unrelated juvenile predator is an anomaly, not a discovery. Anomalies are corrected." "With respect," Vera said, "the data gathered today exceeds anything we projected from this trial series. The bond formed here could redefine our entire understanding of—" "The juvenile will be reassigned to the standard conditioning program," Director Solus interrupted, as if Vera had not spoken at all. "The human subject will be returned to general holding pending review." Finn, sensing the shift in tone, even without understanding the words, pressed himself harder against me, a low whine building in his throat. "No," I said, my voice rough but absolutely certain. "You're not taking him." Director Solus's eyes finally settled fully on me, cold and unreadable. "You are not in a position to make demands, Subject 12. "My name is Daniel," I said, forcing myself to my feet, despite the protest from my shoulder, Finn rising with me, refusing to leave my side even now. "And I just took a hit meant for him, because nobody in this room was willing to call off a trial that was never fair to begin with. If that doesn't earn me the right to say something, I don't know what does." The room fell completely silent. Even Vera seemed to be holding perfectly still, watching the exchange with an expression I could not fully read. Director Solus studied me for a long moment, something cold and calculating moving behind those dark eyes. "You misunderstand your position here," the director finally said. "But your conviction has been noted." With that, Director Solus turned and walked out of the room without another word, leaving the air behind thick with a tension that had nothing to do with the trial that had just ended. Vera let out a long breath once the door had fully closed, a sound that felt distinctly relieved despite everything that had just happened. "That," Vera said quietly, "was not the response I was hoping for." "What does it mean?" I asked, pulling Finn closer against my side, ignoring the sharp protest from my injured shoulder. "For him. For both of us." Vera's amber eyes flicked toward the door the director had just walked through, then back to me, something heavy and uncertain settling into its expression. "It means," Vera said slowly, "that we no longer have much time." "Time for what?" I asked. Vera moved closer, lowering its voice even though the room appeared empty except for the three of us. "Director Solus does not make idle statements. Reassignment to the standard conditioning program will not wait for further review. It will likely happen within the next full cycle, perhaps sooner." "What does conditioning actually mean?" I asked, though part of me already feared I knew the answer. "It means removing the very qualities that made today's trial unique," Vera said. "Compassion, hesitation, attachment, all of it stripped away through repeated exposure to controlled stress, until only the intended combat behavior remains. By the time the process is complete, the creature you know as Finn will no longer recognize you, nor would he choose to protect anyone but himself." My chest tightened at the thought, sharper than the pain still radiating from my shoulder. Finn pressed his head against my hand, completely unaware of the conversation happening just above him, trusting me the same way he had from the very first quiet moment we shared on this floor. "Then we stop it," I said, "whatever it takes." "The facility is not easily defied," Vera said, "especially not by a single research assistant and an injured human test subject. You said it yourself, the data we created today matters. Doesn't that count for something with whoever's above the director?" Vera hesitated, glancing toward the door once more before answering. "There is a higher council that oversees research programs like this one. Director Solus answers to them, the same as I do. If sufficient evidence reached that council directly, evidence of this magnitude, it is possible the conditioning order could be reviewed before it is carried out." Then let's send them the evidence, I said. It is not so simple, Vera said. All formal reports pass through the director's office first. Anything I submit independently would be flagged immediately and likely erased before reaching anyone capable of intervening. So go around the system, I said. There has to be another way. Vera was quiet for a long moment, studying me with those amber eyes in a way that made me feel like I was being weighed against some invisible scale only it could see. There may be one option, Vera finally said, unsanctioned and considerable risk attached. The kind of risk that, if discovered, would end my position here and likely far worse for you. I'm already a prisoner in a facility I didn't ask to be brought to, I said. I think I can handle worse. The council convenes a review session once every full cycle to assess ongoing research programs across multiple facilities, Vera said. If a direct transmission reached them during that session, bypassing the director's filtered reports entirely, it would be seen by every member present, including evidence of today's trial. When is the next session? I asked. 2 full cycles from now, Vera said, which is longer than we likely have before Finn is reassigned. My stomach dropped at that. Then it doesn't help us. Unless, Vera said slowly, the session were moved forward. Emergency sessions can be called under specific conditions, a direct threat to ongoing research integrity, for example. And how do we manufacture a threat like that? Vera's expression shifted into something I had not seen from it before, something that looked almost like the beginning of a plan rather than simple concern. We do not manufacture it. We reveal what is already happening. If word reached the council that a director was preparing to erase a result this significant purely to protect existing models from contradiction, that alone may qualify as exactly the kind of threat capable of forcing an emergency review. So we need proof, I said. Proof of what Solus is planning to do to Finn. Proof, Vera agreed, and a way to deliver it without passing through the very systems Solus controls. Finn shifted against my leg, letting out a soft sound, almost as if he sensed the shift in the room from fear into something resembling determination. I reached down and rubbed gently behind his ear, the gesture as much for my own comfort as his at this point. Tell me what you need from me, I said. Whatever it is, I'll do it. Vera studied me for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind those amber eyes. What I need, Vera finally said, is for you to trust someone you have known for less than a single cycle, with the lives of both yourself and the creature you have grown to care for so quickly. I looked down at Finn, who looked back up at me with complete and total trust, the same trust he had given me from almost the very first moment in this room. He trusted me before he had any real reason to, I said. Seems only fair I return the favor. Something in Vera's posture eased slightly at that, the closest thing to relief I had seen from it since the director walked out of the room. Then rest if you are able, Vera said. Your shoulder requires attention, and tomorrow will demand more from both of you than today already has. What exactly happens tomorrow? I asked. Vera moved toward the door, pausing just before stepping through it, glancing back at the two of us, the injured human and the trembling young predator pressed together against the wall of a cold metal room. Tomorrow, Vera said quietly, we find out whether trust travels as far as you believe it does. The door slid shut, leaving Finn and me alone once again in the quiet hum of the facility, the weight of everything Vera had just said settling heavily over both of us. I leaned my head back against the wall, ignoring the throbbing pain in my shoulder, and felt Finn curl tighter into my side, his breathing slow and even now that the danger had finally passed. Tomorrow, apparently, would decide everything. I just hoped trust really did travel as far as I needed it to. The lights changed before I was ready for them. Pale yellow, flickering twice, then steady. Finn was on his feet instantly, ears up, body alert in a way I had not seen since the trial with Korath. He had learned, the same way I had, that changing light meant changing circumstances. The door slid open, and Vera stepped through alone, moving faster than I had ever seen it move before. It is happening now, Vera said. No greeting, no pause. Solus moved the reassignment forward, We have far less time than expected. My pulse spiked immediately. How much time? Minutes, Vera said. Not hours. I was on my feet before I even finished processing the word, Finn pressing close against my leg, sensing the sudden shift in energy radiating off both of us. The plan, I said. Tell me the plan. Vera moved to the wall beside the door, pressing a small device against a hidden panel I had never noticed before. A section of the wall slid open silently, revealing a narrow corridor lit by dim blue light. This leads to the lower transmission chamber, Vera said. From there, I can route a direct signal to the Council, bypassing every filter Solus controls. But the chamber requires physical authorization. Mine alone is not sufficient for an emergency override. Then whose is? I asked, already moving toward the opening. Yours, Vera said. Subject biometric data, taken during intake, remains on file specifically for trials such as this one. It was never meant to be used this way, but the system does not know that. I did not have time to question how strange that sounded. Finn moved with me instantly as I stepped into the narrow corridor, Vera close behind, sealing the wall shut once we were through. The corridor was cold, narrower than the room we had just left, lit only by thin strips of blue light running along the floor, like a runway guiding us forward. Move quickly, Vera said. Quietly. Security patrols this level on a fixed rotation. We have a window, but it will not stay open long. We moved fast. Finn stayed pressed against my leg the entire way, his claws making barely a sound against the smooth floor, years of instinct apparently including the ability to move without being heard. The corridor bent sharply to the left, opening into a small junction with 3 more paths branching off. Vera paused only a second before choosing the center path without hesitation. Footsteps. Distant, but coming closer. Vera froze. I froze. Even Finn went completely still beside me, every muscle locked tight. Patrol, Vera whispered. Early. They should not be here yet. Other way, I whispered back, nodding toward the right-hand path. That route adds time we do not have. Then we move faster. We cut right, moving as quickly as silence allowed, the footsteps growing louder behind us, before fading slightly as the corridor curved away from their position. My shoulders screamed with every quick movement, the injury from the day before refusing to be ignored, but I pushed through it, focused entirely on the small body moving beside me and the narrow path ahead. The corridor opened suddenly into a wider room filled with humming machinery, screens lit with shifting symbols I could not read, and a single raised platform in the center surrounded by a faint glowing barrier. The transmission chamber, Vera said, moving quickly toward the platform. Step onto the center plate, quickly. I stepped forward, Finn following close behind, but the moment my foot touched the platform, a sharp tone rang out through the room, and the glowing barrier around it flashed bright red. That is not supposed to happen, Vera said, voice tight with sudden alarm. What does it mean? I asked, my heart slamming against my ribs. It means the system has flagged an unauthorized override attempt, Vera said, fingers moving rapidly across one of the glowing screens. Solus anticipated this. The biometric authorization has been locked. Footsteps again. Closer this time. Multiple sets. Vera, I said, we need another option, right now. There is one, Vera said, still working frantically at the screen. A manual override exists, but it requires physical contact sustained long enough to register intent rather than simple presence. If interrupted, the transmission fails completely. How long? Long enough that you will not be able to defend yourself if security arrives before it completes. I looked at Finn, who looked back up at me, ears pressed flat against the rising tension in the room, completely unaware of what was actually at stake, but clearly feeling the danger building around us. Do it, I said. Start the override. Daniel, do it, I said again, stepping fully onto the platform. I'll handle whoever comes through that door. Vera hesitated only a second before nodding sharply and pressing both hands against the glowing console. The barrier around the platform shifted from red, back to a steady blue, and a low hum began building beneath my feet. "Maintain contact with the plate," Vera said. "Do not move until the transmission completes." The doors on the far side of the room burst open. Two figures in gray rushed in first, the same kind I had seen during that very first trial, poles raised and glowing. Behind them, Director Solus entered at a measured pace, expression unreadable even from across the room. "Stop the transmission," Solus said, voice carrying easily across the humming chamber. "This action will not be tolerated." "The data deserves to be seen," Vera called back, still working the console without looking up. "You know this. You have always known this." Solus's eyes shifted to me, standing firm on the glowing platform, with Finn pressed tight against my leg. "Step away from the chamber, Subject 12, Solus said. "This does not need to end badly for you." "It already ended badly the moment you decided to erase him," I said, nodding toward Finn without taking my eyes off the gray figures slowly advancing. "I'm not moving." The two gray figures stepped closer, poles raised, their glowing tips humming with whatever energy they carried. Finn's body tensed beside me, a low growl building in his throat, the first sound of true aggression I had ever heard him make. Not fear this time, something else. "Easy," I murmured, though I was not entirely sure which one of us I was talking to anymore. One of the gray figures lunged forward. I moved on instinct, stepping slightly to absorb the strike meant for the platform itself, taking the hit across my already injured shoulder. Pain exploded through my arm, white and sharp, but I stayed upright, stayed on the platform, refusing to let the contact break. Finn moved faster than I could track, darting forward and clamping his jaws around the figure's wrist, not hard enough to seriously injure, but more than enough to disrupt the second strike aimed my way. "Finn!" I shouted, equal parts warning and disbelief. The figure yanked back hard, shaking Finn loose, sending him tumbling across the floor. He scrambled back up instantly, placing himself between me and the second advancing figure, small body trembling but holding firm. "Transmission at 60%, Vera called out, voice strained with effort. "Hold the contact." Solus moved forward now, expression finally cracking into something sharper, more urgent. "This ends now. Restrain them both." The second gray figure lunged toward Finn. I stepped off the platform without thinking, my hand instantly leaving the glowing surface, throwing myself between the figure and Finn's small body, taking the full force of the strike across my chest instead. The impact knocked the air completely out of my lungs, sending me crashing hard onto the floor, vision swimming with bright white spots. I heard Vera shout something I could not fully process, heard the humming behind me stutter and falter. "No," I gasped, forcing myself onto my hands despite the pain ripping through my chest. "No, not yet." "Transmission interrupted," Vera said, voice tight with panic. "Daniel, the contact, you have to re-establish contact." I crawled, every inch agony, hands and knees scraping hard against cold metal floor, Finn suddenly beside me, pressing his head beneath my arm, trying to help me up the only way he knew how. I reached the platform's edge and threw myself forward, slamming my palm flat against the glowing surface just as the hum beneath my feet sputtered back to life. "Reconnected," Vera shouted. "Hold, just hold." Solus's expression had shifted now into something close to fury, the calm and measured tone from before completely gone. "You have no idea what you are interfering with." "Then explain it," I said through gritted teeth, blood trickling from somewhere along my hairline, dripping down past my eye. "Explain it to the council yourself, in 2 minutes, when they see exactly what you were planning to do." The two gray figures advanced again, but Finn placed himself firmly in front of me this time, small body coiled tight, teeth bared, no trace of the trembling cub from that very first day anywhere left in him. "Transmission at 90%, Vera called out. "Almost there, almost." A sharp tone rang out through the chamber, different from before, higher pitched, almost triumphant. "Transmission complete," Vera said, voice flooding with sudden relief. "The council has received it. All of it." Solus froze, the fury in their expression shifting rapidly into something colder, something far more dangerous. "Then it seems," Solus said quietly, "we will simply have to wait and see what they decide." I stayed exactly where I was, one hand still pressed against the glowing platform, Finn standing firm in front of me, both of us bruised and breathing hard, having no idea whether what we had just done would be enough to save either one of us. Solus did not move for a long moment, those dark eyes fixed on Vera, with an intensity that made the temperature in the room feel like it had dropped several degrees. "You understand what this means for you," Solus said quietly. "Regardless of the Council's decision, your position here is finished. Unauthorized transmission to an oversight body, manipulation of a subject for personal cause, falsification of trial protocols. The list will be long." "I am aware," Vera said, stepping away from the console now that the transmission had completed, posture straightening despite the obvious risk standing across the room. "I made my choice knowing the cost." "And the human," Solus said, eyes shifting toward me. "Did he understand the cost as well, when you convinced him to risk his life for a creature he has known less than a single cycle?" "I understood enough," I said, pulling myself fully upright despite the protest from my chest and shoulder, Finn pressing close against my side once more. "I understood that erasing him because he didn't fit your models was wrong. That was enough for me." Solus studied me for a long moment, something unreadable shifting behind those cold eyes. "Your species continues to surprise us in ways our models fail to predict. Perhaps that is precisely why programs like this one exist, to understand what we cannot yet model. Or maybe," I said, "you should stop trying to model us at all, and just ask." Something flickered across Solus's expression at that, gone too quickly for me to name it. The two gray figures still stood near the platform, poles lowered now but not fully withdrawn, waiting for some signal from their director that had not yet come. "What happens now?" Vera asked, voice steadier than I expected given everything that had just happened. "Now," Solus said, "we wait. The Council does not act quickly, even in matters flagged as urgent. It may be several full cycles before any formal response arrives." My stomach dropped at that. Several cycles, and what happens to Finn during that time? "The reassignment order remains active until the Council states otherwise," Solus said. "I see no reason to delay it further simply because a transmission was sent." Finn's ears flattened immediately, as if some part of him understood exactly what those words meant, even without translation. "You can't," I said, stepping forward despite every injury screaming at me to stay still. "The whole point of that transmission was to stop this before it happened." "The transmission's purpose," Solus said, "was to inform the Council. It was not authorization to halt an active facility protocol. Those are very different things, Subject 12. I felt something cold settle into my chest, colder than any of the physical pain currently radiating through my body. "Then it was all for nothing." "Not for nothing," Vera said quickly, stepping closer. "The Council will see the footage. They will see the trials, the bond, today's events in full. Whatever happens to Finn between now and their response, the truth of what occurred here cannot be erased." "That doesn't help him right now," I said, my voice cracking with a frustration I could not fully control. Solus turned toward the two gray figures still waiting near the platform. "Take the juvenile to the conditioning wing, immediately." "No," I said, moving instantly to place myself between them and Finn, ignoring every protest from my battered body. "You are not taking him while we wait for some council to get around to reading a report. You are not in a position to prevent this," Solus said, voice flat and final. The gray figures stepped forward, and Finn pressed himself low against the floor behind me, a low growl building in his throat, equal parts fear and defiance. I had nothing left to fight with, no weapon, no authority, no leverage beyond a single transmission that apparently meant nothing without formal council action behind it. But I was not about to simply stand aside and let this happen without a fight. "Then I'll stand here as long as it takes," I said. "You'll have to go through me first." The chamber fell silent except for the steady hum of machinery and the low, warning growl still rumbling in Finn's throat. Solus studied the two of us for a long, unreadable moment, weighing something I could not begin to guess at. Then, without warning, every screen in the chamber flickered at once, and a sharp tone rang out, different from anything I had heard before, deep and resonant, filling the entire room. Vera's eyes went wide, fixed on the largest screen near the console. "That signal," Vera said, voice barely above a whisper, "that is not a standard transmission alert." "What is it?" I asked, not daring to look away from the gray figures still standing just a few feet from Finn and me. Vera turned slowly toward the screen, reading whatever message had just appeared there, an expression crossing its face that I had never seen before, somewhere between disbelief and something close to hope. "It is the Council," Vera said. "They are responding now. Immediately. They are requesting direct presence, all parties involved, within this very chamber." Solus's expression shifted sharply, surprise breaking through the cold composure for just a moment before being carefully smoothed back into place. "That is not standard procedure," Solus said. "Nothing about this entire trial has been standard procedure," Vera said, something almost like satisfaction creeping into its voice now. The air in the chamber seemed to shift entirely, every figure present suddenly very still, waiting to see exactly what was about to happen next. I looked down at Finn, who had stopped growling, his ears slowly lifting again as he sensed the change in tension around us, though he clearly had no idea what it actually meant. "Whatever happens next," I murmured to him quietly, "I'm not leaving your side." The largest screen flickered once more, and a new voice began to emerge from the speakers overhead, calm, measured, and entirely unfamiliar, carrying a weight that made even Solus straighten with sudden attention. The Council had arrived. The voice that filled the chamber did not belong to any single figure standing in front of us. It came from everywhere at once, calm and unhurried, the kind of voice that had clearly never needed to raise itself to be heard. Director Solus. Researcher Vera. Subject 12. We have reviewed the transmitted material in full. Solus straightened immediately, posture shifting into something formal and rigid. Council members. This transmission was sent without proper authorization. I would ask that any review take into account the manner in which— "The manner is noted," the voice interrupted, smooth and unbothered. "The content has already been judged far more significant than the method used to deliver it." I felt Finn press tighter against my leg, sensing the shift in everyone's posture, even without understanding a single word being spoken. I reached down and rested my hand on his back, partly to comfort him, partly because I needed something steady to hold on to myself. "We have observed 7 full cycles of trial data from this facility," the voice continued. "In every recorded instance involving juveniles of this particular breeding line, subjects exposed to perceived threat responded with either complete submission or violent defense. Subject 12's recorded behavior matches neither pattern. As I explained in my own assessments," Vera said quickly, stepping forward, "the bond formed between Subject 12 and the juvenile represents an entirely new category of response, one our existing models failed to predict or account for." "We are aware of your assessments, Researcher Vera," the voice said. "We are also aware they were repeatedly dismissed by facility leadership prior to today's transmission." Solus's jaw tightened, though no words followed. "Subject 12, the voice said, shifting its attention directly toward me now. "You placed yourself in direct physical danger on 2 separate occasions to protect a juvenile predator that, by every established model within this facility, should have viewed you as either competition or prey. We would like to understand why." I hesitated for a moment, unsure how to explain something that had never once felt like a decision while it was happening. "Because he was scared," I finally said. "Because nobody chooses to be born into a breeding program designed to make them into a weapon, any more than I chose to be taken from my home to be tested in one. We were both stuck here. Neither of us asked for any of this. Seemed wrong to make it worse for either of us when we didn't have to." The chamber fell silent for a long moment, the weight of those words settling over everyone present. A simple answer, the voice finally said. For a result our most advanced predictive systems failed entirely to anticipate. Maybe your systems are looking for the wrong thing, I said. You keep testing for strength, for danger, for how far a person will go to survive, but survival isn't the only thing that matters. Sometimes what matters more is who you're willing to stand beside, even when it costs you something. Another long pause followed, longer than the first. Director Solus, the voice finally said, tone shifting into something far more formal. Your reassignment order for the juvenile designated in this trial series is hereby suspended, pending full council review of this facility's testing protocols. Solus's expression flickered, something close to anger quickly buried beneath practiced composure. Council members, I must object. This facility's entire research framework depends on— Your objection is noted and will be considered separately, the voice said, cutting through Solus's protest without hesitation. For now, the juvenile remains under researcher Vera's direct supervision, with Subject 12 granted continued access as a recognized component of ongoing observation. I felt something loosen in my chest at those words, a tension I had been carrying since the very first day I woke up in this facility finally easing, even just slightly. What about Subject 12's status? Vera asked. His original intake designation marked him for eventual return or reassignment following trial completion. Given today's outcome, I would request the Council consider an alternative arrangement. There was a brief pause before the voice responded. Explain your reasoning, researcher Vera. The bond demonstrated today was not artificially induced, Vera said. It occurred naturally, under genuine threat, repeated across multiple trials with consistent results. Separating Subject 12 from the juvenile now, after such a bond has formed, risks undoing the very outcome this council found significant enough to warrant emergency review. Another pause, longer this time, filled only by the steady hum of machinery around us. Your reasoning is sound, the voice finally said. Subject 12's status will be elevated from trial subject to recognized research partner, effective immediately, pending his own agreement to the terms of continued cooperation. All eyes in the room, alien and human alike, turned toward me. I looked down at Finn, who looked back up at me with those same wide, trusting eyes from that very first day, completely unaware of how much had just shifted in the span of a single conversation. What exactly does cooperation mean? I asked carefully. I want to understand it fully before I agree to anything. It means continued presence within this facility, the voice said, continued interaction with the juvenile under monitored conditions, and continued contribution to research that, given today's events, may fundamentally reshape how our species approaches contact with yours. It does not mean captivity in the manner you have experienced thus far. Subject 12. You would be afforded the rights and protections of a recognized partner, not a contained specimen. None of it felt as solid anymore as it once had, fading into something distant and faded, like a memory belonging to someone else entirely. I thought instead about 3 days spent slowly earning the trust of a frightened creature through nothing more than patience and a willingness to sit still. I thought about a claw scraping lightly against my heel, a head pressed into my open palm, a small body curling against mine through a night with no clock to measure how long the fear actually lasted. I thought about Finn standing in front of me, growling at a predator twice his size, refusing to run even when every instinct in his small body must have been screaming at him to do exactly that. What happens to him if I say no? I asked. The reassignment suspension applies regardless of your personal decision, the voice said. Your choice affects only your own continued involvement, not the juvenile's immediate safety. That answer settled something in me, knowing that whatever I chose, Finn would not pay the price for it. But even knowing that, The choice in front of me did not feel difficult at all. "I'll stay," I said, "on one condition." "State your condition," the voice said. "I want some way to contact my family back home," I said. "Even just to let them know I'm alive. They deserve that much, whatever else happens here." There was a brief pause before the voice responded. "A reasonable request. Arrangements will be made to establish limited communication, within parameters that protect both parties involved." I let out a long breath. I had not realized I was holding, feeling Finn press himself harder against my side, almost as if he understood, in whatever way a creature like him could understand, that something important had just been decided. "Then I accept," I said. "Acceptance noted," the voice said. "This council session is concluded. Director Solus, full protocol review will commence within the next cycle. Researcher Vera, your continued oversight of this case is formally authorized. Subject 12, designation Daniel Brooks, your status update will be processed immediately." The largest screen flickered once more, then went dark, the resonant voice fading from the chamber entirely, leaving behind only the steady hum of machinery and the quiet sound of everyone present finally exhaling at once. Solus remained still for a long moment, jaw tight, eyes distant, clearly processing everything that had just unfolded. Eventually, without another word, the director turned and walked out of the chamber, the two gray figures following close behind, leaving only Vera, Finn, and me standing amid the glowing consoles. Vera let out a long, slow breath, shoulders dropping in a way that finally looked genuinely relieved rather than carefully composed. "That," Vera said, "went better than I dared to hope." "You took a massive risk for both of us," I said. "Why?" Vera considered the question for a moment before answering. "Because I have spent many cycles studying species across known space, searching for patterns that explain behavior, motivation, survival. Rarely have I witnessed something as simple and as powerful as what occurred between the two of you in such a short span of time. Some discoveries are worth risking everything to protect." I looked down at Finn, who had finally relaxed completely, sitting calmly beside me now instead of pressed tight against my leg in fear. His eyes drifted up toward mine, calm and steady, none of the trembling fear from that very first day anywhere left in him. "What happens now?" I asked. "Practically speaking." "Now," Vera said, "you rest, properly this time, with actual medical attention for those injuries you have been ignoring far too long. Tomorrow, we begin building something neither of our species has truly attempted before." "And Finn?" I asked. "What happens to him long term?" "He remains with you," Vera said, "for as long as that arrangement continues to benefit you both. Given everything I have witnessed over these past several days, I suspect that arrangement will last considerably longer than either of us might have originally guessed." I reached down and scratched gently behind Finn's ear, feeling him lean into the touch the same way he had from almost the very beginning, trust given freely, long before it had ever been earned in any way that made logical sense. 3 weeks ago, I had been driving home from a normal day at work, completely unaware that my entire life was about to change in ways no person could have ever prepared for. I had been taken from everything familiar, placed inside a cold metal room, and told to survive a trial designed to study fear and aggression in the face of genuine danger. Instead, somewhere between that first trembling moment and this quiet one now, I had found something neither the researchers nor I had ever expected to find in a place like this. Vera left the chamber not long after, promising to return once proper medical attention had been arranged, leaving Finn and me alone amid the quiet hum of consoles slowly powering down around us. I sat down carefully against the base of the platform, my shoulder throbbing, my chest aching with every breath, and let myself finally feel the full weight of everything that had happened over the past several days. Finn climbed into my lap without hesitation, far too large now to truly fit there comfortably, but neither of us seemed to care about that small detail. "We did it," I said quietly, resting my hand along his back, feeling his heartbeat slow into something calm and steady beneath my palm. "I don't know what happens next, but we actually did it. Finn let out a long breath, almost like a sigh, and pressed his head beneath my chin the way he had started doing over the past few days whenever he wanted comfort more than anything else. I thought about Korath then, the fully grown predator who had hesitated at exactly the wrong moment for his training and exactly the right moment for us. I wondered what would happen to him now, whether the Council's review would reach far enough to consider his fate as well, or whether he would remain exactly as he had been built to be, with no one ever questioning whether that was truly fair to him either. I made a quiet promise to myself, sitting there on that cold floor, that if this strange new arrangement truly gave me any influence within this facility, I would not stop with just one. Finn deserved this outcome. So did Korath. So did every other creature somewhere in this building being shaped into something it never chose to become. The door slid open sometime later, though I had lost all sense of how much time had actually passed. Vera returned with two new figures, smaller than the gray-suited security I had grown used to seeing, dressed instead in soft white, carrying equipment that looked far gentler than anything I had encountered in this facility so far. "Medical attention," Vera explained, gesturing toward the two figures. "Your injuries require proper treatment, and our physicians have already reviewed your physiology in preparation." Finn growled low in his throat at the approach of strangers, instinct flaring despite everything that had happened. "It's okay," I said softly, running my hand along his back until the growl faded into a quiet, watchful silence. "They're here to help, not hurt. You can stay right here while they work." He seemed to understand enough of my tone, if not my words, settling beside me instead of backing away, watching the medical figures with careful, suspicious eyes as they began treating my shoulder and the cut along my hairline. The treatment stung in places, a cool, sharp sensation followed by warmth that slowly eased the deep ache radiating through my chest. I gritted my teeth through most of it, focusing on the steady weight of Finn pressed against my side, rather than the discomfort of unfamiliar alien medicine working its way through unfamiliar human injuries. "You will recover fully within a short number of cycles," one of the white-dressed figures said once the treatment was complete, voice gentle in a way I had not expected. "Rest will accelerate the process considerably." "Thank you," I said, and meant it, surprised by how strange it felt to receive genuine kindness inside the same building where I had spent the past several weeks as nothing more than a numbered test subject. Once the medical figures left, Vera remained behind, settling down nearby, with a posture far more relaxed than I had seen from it since we first met. "You handled today with more composure than most experienced diplomats I have encountered across many cycles of service," Vera said. "Didn't feel like composure," I admitted. "Felt like barely holding everything together and hoping it worked out anyway." "Perhaps that is what composure truly is," Vera said. "Not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it." I considered that for a moment, watching Finn finally drift into an exhausted, peaceful sleep curled against my side, his earlier growl completely forgotten now that the immediate danger had passed. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Of course." "Why did you risk everything for this?" I asked. "Your position, your career, maybe even your safety. You barely knew me. You could have stayed quiet, let the trial results stand as some unexplained anomaly, and moved on with your research the way Solus wanted." Vera was quiet for a long moment, considering the question carefully before answering. "I once had a creature of my own, many cycles ago," Vera finally said, voice softer than I had heard it before. "Not from a breeding program, a companion species from my own homeworld, chosen freely rather than assigned through any trial. When she grew old and her time came to an end, I remember feeling as though I had lost something far greater than simply an animal. I had lost a friend who never once judged me by anything other than how I treated her. I felt something tighten in my chest at that, an understanding passing between us that needed no further translation. Watching you and Finn together these past several days," Vera continued, "reminded me of something I had nearly forgotten during all these cycles spent studying species as data rather than individuals. Some bonds matter more than any research model could ever properly measure. I could not, in good conscience, allow that bond to be erased simply because it inconvenienced someone else's predetermined conclusions. I reached out, and somewhat awkwardly, placed my hand against Vera's arm, a gesture I was not entirely sure translated the same way across our two species, but one that felt right regardless. "Thank you," I said simply, "for everything." Vera's amber eyes softened slightly at the gesture, something that might have been the alien equivalent of a smile crossing its features. "Thank Finn as well, when he wakes. None of this would have unfolded as it did without his own choice to trust you in that very first moment." I looked down at Finn, still sound asleep, completely unaware of how close this entire outcome had come to falling apart at multiple points along the way. "I will," I said quietly. "Every single day, if I have to." The lights above us shifted slowly from white to a soft, warm gold, different from any color I had seen in this facility before, and Vera glanced upward with something like quiet satisfaction. "A new cycle beginning," Vera explained, noticing my confused expression. "Considered a small mark of renewal among my people. Fitting, given today's events." I leaned my head back against the platform behind me, feeling exhaustion finally catch up with everything my body had been through. Finn's steady breathing beside me, the only sound filling the quiet chamber now. 3 weeks ago, I had been an ordinary man driving home from an ordinary job, with no idea that my life was about to be pulled apart and rebuilt into something I never could have imagined. I had arrived in this place as nothing more than a number, a test subject meant to reveal data about fear and survival under pressure. Instead, I had found something far more valuable than any data point could ever capture. I had found trust in its purest form, freely given by a creature who owed me nothing and had every reason in the world to be afraid of me instead. Finn stirred slightly in his sleep, letting out a soft, contented sound, pressing himself even closer against my side without ever fully waking. I smiled, despite everything, despite the pain still lingering in my shoulder, despite the uncertainty of everything still waiting for us beyond this single quiet moment. Whatever this strange new life among the stars would ask of me next, I would face it the same way I had faced that very first trial, the same way I had faced Korath, the same way I had faced an entire council deciding both of our futures in a matter of minutes. I would face it with Finn beside me. And somehow, against every expectation either species had carried into that cold metal room on the very first day, that felt like more than enough.